All right, let's dive straight into one of the most fascinating and frankly heartbreaking corners of Greek mythology. We're looking at Apollo. Now, you probably know him as this stunningly beautiful god of the sun, right? But what we're breaking down today is how his love life was basically cursed. If you ever thought being a god meant having it easy, Apollo's story is going to completely change your mind. Because right off the bat, we're hit with this incredible paradox. On one hand, you have the god of healing and light. He literally holds ultimate divine power. He can cure plagues, he grants knowledge to the whole world. But on the other hand, utter helplessness. When it actually comes down to saving the mortals he falls in love with from death, he can't do a single thing. It is completely tragic. To really understand his bitter fate, we're going to summarize three main events that define his tragic romances. We'll start with his identity as the god of tragic love, move through the devastating accidents involving Hyacinthus and Cyparissus, and finally answer the big question: why exactly does Apollo always lose love?
Kicking things off with the god of tragic love. In Greek legends, deep, passionate, same-sex relationships between gods and mortals were actually super common, and Apollo's romances are the perfect example of this. They show us both the incredible beauty and the agonizing pain of a god falling for a mortal.
I mean, look at his resume. He literally had everything. God of light and sun? Check. Provider of knowledge? Check. Unmatched physical beauty? Absolutely. But despite having all these incredible traits, he was doomed to constant romantic tragedy. Every time he fell in love, heartbreak was pretty much guaranteed. We can actually map out his sorrow through a timeline of three interconnected events. First, falling for the Spartan prince Hyacinthus, then the fatal discus throw fueled by Zephyrus's jealousy, and finally, the intense, crushing grief of the young hunter Cyparissus. It's a literal roadmap of a broken heart.
Let's zoom in on that first event, Hyacinthus' accident. So Apollo falls head over heels for this incredibly handsome Spartan prince. Now, Hyacinthus had a lot of powerful suitors chasing him, including gods of the winds, but out of all of them, he actually chooses Apollo. Apollo was so utterly infatuated that he abandons his sacred duties at Delphi just to go live by the Eros River with his new love. They spent their days together, with Apollo teaching the prince music, archery, and just playing sports, having the time of their lives. But then we hit this horrific turning point. They decide to throw a discus around. Apollo, using his incredible divine strength, hurls the discus so high it literally parts the clouds. Hyacinthus, super excited, runs to catch it, but the discus violently bounces off the ground and strikes him in the head. It's a fatal injury. Apollo's own mighty strength unintentionally causes the ultimate tragedy. But wait, as we move to the second event, there's a much darker side to this story. Enter Zephyrus, the god of the west wind, who was one of those suitors Hyacinthus rejected. And let me tell you, he did not take that rejection well. Here's how it actually went down. First, Zephyrus spots the two of them playing happily. Consumed by this intense, toxic jealousy, he just waits in the shadows for the discus to be thrown into the air. And then, he deliberately uses his wind powers to blow the discus off course, turning it into a lethal weapon. This wasn't just an accident. It was premeditated murder driven by a "if I can't have him, no one will" mentality. Apollo rushes to his dying lover, realizing all his healing herbs are totally useless against fate. He screams out this heartbreaking line: "I wish I could become mortal to die alongside you." Think about how desperate that is. The god of healing, utterly powerless, wishing he could just throw away his immortality. Since he can't save his life, Apollo vows to keep Hyacinthus' memory alive forever. He transforms his lover's spilled blood into the blooming hyacinth flower. It's this beautiful yet incredibly tragic botanical monument to his grief. Now, moving to the third event, you'd think Apollo would swear off love after that, right? But later on, he falls for a clever young hunter named Cyparissus. As a symbol of his affection, Apollo gifts him this magnificent, tame deer. This deer becomes Cyparissus' absolute best friend. But then, tragedy strikes again. While out hunting one day, Cyparissus accidentally kills his own beloved deer, and the guilt, it sends this young man into an unbearable spiral of absolute sorrow. He just weeps endlessly over the deer's body. He literally begs Apollo to let him mourn forever, completely ignoring Apollo's warnings that this grief will destroy him.
Taking pity on his lover's agonizing request, Apollo transforms Cypyrus into a weeping cypress tree, where the dripping sap represents his endless tears.
Having seen these incredibly bitter fates, we arrive at the core question of our breakdown today. Why did Apollo lose love? When we compare these stories side by side, the parallels are undeniable. Whether it's Hyacinthus or Cypyrus, you have immense love cut short by a violent twist of fate, be it a discus fueled by jealousy or an accidental deer kill. And both stories end with the lover being transformed into an eternal monument of grief. So it all comes down to this. Why does Apollo, the god of the sun and healing, consistently and completely lose the people he loves? Why can't he ever save them? Well, the brutal takeaway here is that gods cannot heal the ultimate wounds of fate. Immortality simply cannot save mortal fragility. No amount of divine power can change destiny. It really leaves us with a provocative thought. When you have to watch everyone you love wither and die while you live on forever, is Apollo's eternal life actually a blessing, or is it his greatest, most lonely punishment? Thanks for joining me for this explainer today, and I'll leave you to think about that one.